Good morning, everyone. This video is for Thursday, June 4th. I hope everybody's having a good week. So for June 4th, it's talking about transformations and congruence. Now, there's something called a rigid transformation. So what a rigid transformation is it's multiple transformations occurring. All right, so it could be a translation and then a rotation. It could be a reflection and then a translation. The biggest thing also to remember about a rigid transformation is that it's going to keep the figure the same size. So this entire section is about doing transformations, keeping the figure the exact same size and shape. So if we think about transformations, right, a translation is, if you think of like my phone here, right? Like this phone, as I move it up and down, left and right, that's a translation. It's like floating in air. It's never changing size. Okay, same thing if I do a rotation. If I rotate this phone, right, again, it's still keeping the same size. And then if I do a reflection where I'm here and then it's going to reflect this direction, a reflection is still keeping the same size as well. Okay, so translation, rotation, and reflection are all transformations that don't change the shape or the size of the figure. And that is the main focus of this section. The ones that do change, right, are a dilation where it gets bigger or smaller, and then obviously stretching it either horizontally or vertically. So we're not focusing on those. So the biggest part is understanding that the rigid transformation is keeping the figure the same size. It's just changing the orientation of it, right? It's changing its location. Now, the one activity in this that can be a little bit confusing in the beginning and how to do is starting on slide 5. Up to this, they're giving you some information about rigid transformations and how figures stay the same size. And after this, they're going to give you a few sample questions, kind of what the mastery test is going to look like. So make sure you pay attention to those practice questions. But the main focus of this lesson is going to be showing you how to use GeoGebra in this activity. So you're going to want to make sure you click on this to open up your GeoGebra window. Also notice, guys, that this right here is instructions. So if you click on this, it takes you to this page right here. And it kind of just helps you learn how to use different aspects of GeoGebra. So for us, on this directions page, what we're looking at is down in the general tools. And it's going to be, let's see, where is it? Here we go, the transformation tools. So it looks like that's on page 8 of this PDF, and I'm going to walk you through how to use it. But notice that under the transformation tool, we can reflect, rotate, translate, and dilate. So make sure if you don't understand after this video, you can look at this. It helps give you directions, but I'm hopefully going to do a pretty good job showing you how to do this. So let's go back to this question. So it says, first, work with stencil 1. Use a combinations of reflections, rotations, and translations, so a rigid transformation, a combination of them, to see whether stencil 1 will overlap with the original pattern. And I'll show you what they're talking about here in a second. List the sequence of rigid transformations you used in your attempt, noting the type of transformation, the directions, the coordinates, and the displacement. So what they're talking about is this right here. So if you open this GeoGebra activity, it's going to look like this here. So remember, you can zoom in and out by kind of scrolling up and down on your trackpad. Notice I've already kind of been messing around with this. So if I click on this, it's got my, now normally it starts off looking like that. So the one with the diagonal arrow and the blue and the red dot. But when I click on it, it gives me all of these options. So reflect over a line, reflect about a point, reflect about a circle, rotate, and translate. The 3 that you're going to want to use are reflect about a line, rotate around a point, and translate. So those are going to be the three. So one more time, reflect about a line, rotate around a point, and translate. Don't worry about the translate by vector. We're going to be able to drag it. So what we're looking at here is here's our original pattern. And we're trying to figure out, can we do a set of transformations to get stencil 1 to sit on top of the original pattern? That's called mapping onto. All right. Now, once we get it there, we're going to be determining whether or not this stencil 1 is congruent, aka the same size and shape, to the original pattern. And then eventually, guys, you'll be trying the same thing with stencil 2. So the whole goal of this activity is determining whether or not this figure can map onto this, and if this figure can map onto this. So notice that I have placed a point right there. So the way that I did that, let's go back here, is I just literally plotted a point right at 0, 0. So the reason I plotted a point at 0, 0 is because when we do rotations, all the rules that we learned in the previous section for rotations were all about rotating around the origin or rotating around 0, 0. And the reason why we had to do that is because if you look at the rotate around the point section, if you look down at the directions, it says select an object to rotate. Click on that one more time. Select an object to rotate and a center point. So you need an actual point to click on in order to rotate around it. So that's why I placed a point at 0, 0. Okay. So to show you how this works, if I want to do a rotation, I first click on the object or the point that I want to rotate around. Once again, let's look at the directions. Rotate around a point. It says select an object to rotate and a center point. So I need to first click on this figure. Now don't click on the lines. You want to click on the kind of, just make sure that that whole thing gets highlighted. Okay, so I click on this and you can kind of see how it changes colors a little bit. All right, when I click on it, then I want to click on the point 0, 0. Then that pops up this window of how much I want to rotate it. Now we've always talked about counterclockwise, right? So if I want to rotate 90 degrees counterclockwise around 0, 0, I'm going to type in 90 degrees. I'm going to press OK. So notice, okay, that my figure rotated 90 degrees counterclockwise in this direction. Now the point of a rotation should be to get the orientation similar to this. Now we can also use reflection though as well, so keep that in mind. So I rotated 90 degrees. Now this image is almost a mirror image of the two figures. So what I need to do is I need to get this reflected over, right? So then what I can do is I can reflect about a line. Select an object to reflect and select the line. Now we didn't draw any lines in, but we do have two lines. Notice that when I hover over the x-axis or the y-axis, I get that pointer finger. What that means is that's something that I can select. So I'm going to select my figure again, and I'm going to select the x-axis. Okay, so I reflected over the x-axis. Now if you compare my new figure to my original pattern, the orientation of them is the same. So the only thing left to do is to translate this image onto this pattern, or our new stencil 1 onto this pattern. So let's quickly review. I rotated around a point 90 degrees to get to down here. Then I reflected this figure over the x-axis using my reflect about a line. So the last thing I need to do is I need to translate this figure onto this. So in order to do that, I'm going to go down and hit translate by vector. And what that allows me to do now is I can actually select an object and I can just drag it. So I can just drag this whole thing right down to there. And notice I could have moved it down anywhere that I want. And every time, notice that it's creating, every transformation is creating a new stencil for stencil 1. Okay. So let's again review what I just did. I first rotated 90 degrees around this point. Remember, this point, I don't think it exists in the beginning. I had to put it in there by using my point 1. Okay. Then, once I got to this one, I reflected over the x-axis using reflect about a line. Then, once I got to up here, I translated and dragged it around. That should help you guys out a lot. So you're going to have to do that with stencil 1 and then also with stencil 2, and you're trying to determine whether or not stencil 1 and stencil 2 both match up with this figure. Okay. Then, if I go back over here, there are a few questions that you have to answer, but this is the majority of the work that you're needed in this tutorial. After this, it's just practice questions, getting ready for the mastery test. Please let me know if you have any questions, guys. Remember, you can always rewatch this a few different times if you got confused. Have a good day.